Hi there, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the modelling I've been doing. The first thing I modelled was Uss Voyager. I did this about 5 years ago. This is the Revell kit, and I did this kit because I'd seen online that a lot of people were able to light this really easily because it comes with a lot of clear plastic parts on the warp engines, on the deflector dish, and the kind of big plastic windows here as well. A lot of people drill out windows, so like the ones that I've painted here. I didn't do it because I just had a feeling that I was going to do a bad job of it. This was the first model that I've ever painted, and I'm fairly happy with the paint job on this model. I used Revell acrylic paints, which I think are really good for painting these models because they dry quite smooth, so you don't get many brush strokes. One thing I'm not happy about with this model is some of the seams between the plastic parts. So you can see on this strut here, there's quite a strong black line here between these struts, so I wasn't that pleased with that. The transfers went on really well, but all in all, I was very happy with this model for a first attempt. The original stand actually broke. There's a sort of plastic strut that comes out of here into the model, but it's actually held into the model by a really flimsy part, and that part snapped off. And so the second model I made was this Amt Enterprise-E, which didn't have as many clear plastic parts, but did have a clear plastic deflector, impulse engines, and clear plastic warp engines. And you can't actually see the blue LEDs lighting up in the warp engines here because the batteries are going. And I had noticed, because I hadn't used the paints for about 5 years, they'd gone a bit gloopy. Some of them had completely dried, and some of them had just gone thick. But reading up on some forums, I found that you can thin acrylic paint with water, so I just put a few drops of water in the acrylic paints. I wouldn't recommend this model for painting, actually, for 2 reasons. Firstly, the plastic is very thin compared to the Revell Voyager model. I had no idea that you're supposed to paint the inside of the models to stop light from bleeding through. So originally, when I glued it all together after painting the parts individually, there was a lot of light bleed through, and so I had to open the model again, paint it. And then secondly, there's not that many clear plastic parts on this model. I think if I was doing this model now, I would drill out these windows on the side. I decided to finish another model I'd had under my bed for quite a while, which is this set of 3, which is also by Amt, I think. We got the original Enterprise. I kind of wanted to practice on these little models before my next big project. And then I painted this Enterprise-A or refit, whichever one it is. This is quite a nice looking kit, but it's quite fiddly. Most of the detail on these, on the Enterprise-A and on the Enterprise-B, are actually decals. So that's hours of cutting out the decals and sticking them all on. I think most of the detail you can see on this is a decal, and there's a lot of decals on top of decals, so there's quite a lot of work. And then this is my favourite. This is the this is the Enterprise-B. A frustrating thing about this kit was that it didn't come with a method of displaying these models, so I bought the Airfix 5-prong stand. These stands retail for about £7. I bought mine from a independent seller on play.com. And then finally I had another model under my bed which I'd started but hadn't finished, which is the NX-01. Each time I think I have actually made improvements to the modelling process, and building up for my next model. I bought an Enterprise-B to work on, which is coming from the States, because you can only buy it over here for like 40 quid, and I've actually got it from the States for like 28 quid, which is pretty good. But I can't wait that long, so I've had to buy another model to work on, and that is the Enterprise NCC 1701. I just got it today. I've got all the paints and stuff I need, and there's loads of stuff in here. There are other videos on YouTube where people go through the contents of this box, so I'm not going to go through it now. But I am going to document my progress making this as I go along. So the first thing I did was take the stand here, which I am going to use, and I spray painted it with a primer coat, 2 primer coats. This was much harder than it should have been. I did it outside in my garden, and after I'd sprayed the first coat, a gust of wind blew it over like that into the mud, and it got covered in mud. So I thought, oh well, that's it, it's completely ruined, and this is the first thing I've tried to paint on it, so it's not going to go very well. But then I remembered a trick that I'd learnt. You can immerse it in I think it's called clear paint or something. It's the stuff by Revell that you use to clean Revell paintbrushes that have been used to paint acrylics. So I got a piece of cotton wool and dabbed it in the cleaner, and then basically washed all the paint off the model and started all over again. This time I took it into my garden shed, and that was a lot more successful, but there were a few bits of dust that got into the shed, and I've had to use a fine 1000 grit sandpaper to get a few of the bits of like grit off. But as a primer coat, this is I'm pretty happy with this. And then the next thing I've done, this probably the other way around or something, looks like that. This is going to go in there. And I've sanded the edges of this and glued these together, and I intend to do a primer coat on this as well, but I've sanded the join between them, and I've also used something called green putty by Squadron to try and clean up the seam between the models. So this is at the moment I'm finding this quite hard to work with. I masked off the around the seam, and then sort of forced the green putty into the gap with a spatula, but it went powdery and flaky very quickly. I think if I just give this a sand now with some fine grit sandpaper, I think that will probably look quite good. And I'll do it to this side as well, which is actually already pretty good because I've sanded them already. And then I'll give this a primer coat, and then I think I intend to paint the whole stand aluminium, apart from the edge, which I'll paint black. So I intend to do this one properly, kind of learning from mistakes in my previous models. This is the saucer section, which is something I'd like to start, but I can't really at the moment because I want to be able to join this together and green putty the seam, but I can't do that until I've lit it, and I've been waiting for some LEDs to arrive from eBay for about 2 weeks now, so I can't do that just yet, but there are plenty of other parts on here. That's where I'm at the moment, right at the beginning of this project. If you've got any questions about what I intend to do with this, or about any of my previous models, please leave a comment in the comment box below, and I'll get back to you. Cheers.